Ash Playstead here, trading psychology master coach. Just prepping, getting ready for the start of episode 16 of the Mindset Reflexology show. This is my show talking about all things psychology and mindset for traders, being broadcast live to LinkedIn and also every episode over to my YouTube channel, Trading Psychology and Mindset. Go and hit the channel up, subscribe, catch all the old episodes back there. But this episode today, episode 16, it is May the 4th, a very significant day for all of us Star Wars fans, May the 4th. So today, we're going to be talking about responsibility and responsibility. Hello, Lygia. How are you today? And I put this in my post on LinkedIn, prepping for this episode. The reasons we get into trading are often the reasons that we get into any form of independence or in entrepreneurship or working for ourselves. And they are independence, autonomy, financial opportunity, which in trading is unlimited, and ultimately to be fully responsible for our own destiny, which is a wonderful and amazing attitude to have in life. But there is another form of responsibility, and that is response-ability. Our ability to identify and manage our responses to external changes in our environment, whatever they may be, but particularly as it applies to trading. So today's episode is, I've called Getting Real and Evolving as a Trader. And this is really what growing as a trader is all about. It's very strongly aligned to growing as a person. Trading mastery is very closely aligned with self-mastery. In fact, I would go as far as to say they are inextricably intertwined. So as always, I have my coffee. I have my show notes in front of me, which I'll be reading from. So excuse me. I'm looking down, making sure that I stay on track with the notes in the presentation. And during this presentation, I'll be getting to these 4 attributes, these 4 archetypes, these 4 latent parts of our nature that we all have that need to be drawn upon and developed as part of our upgraded trading identity. So, at some point in the evolution of every trader, they realize they have to grow up. They have to evolve from who they were before they were a trader and really become the kind of mind, the kind of person that can produce success in trading. Because there's a difference. There's a huge difference. And the question is, if and when did you wake up? Now, usually there's a story behind it. You get into it with all the idea about, we can really ratchet this thing up, this trading, and you can see a number of opportunities and you can see what trading can really do for you. And you think of all that personal freedom, all of those things I mentioned before, the independence, the autonomy, the freedom, the control, all that stuff. And it's just intoxicating. Okay, so you get into it. And before long, you're still working at it and you realize, okay, I have to be able to learn all this stuff, have this knowledge base so that I can achieve those goals. Okay. So it goes from intoxication to knowledge acquisition. And then, 2, 3, 4, 5 years pass. And what you notice is you're still behind the game. Success is still close. It's just around the corner. But every time you start to get there, it's like a mirage. It keeps getting further away. So you start going to yourself, what drove me? Why did I get into this? And usually it's money, and the personal freedom. And you think about the ratcheting up, all of that stuff where you've thought about, the financial opportunity, and it seems so great. Then a lot of traders, once they get in, they get fascinated by the whole notion of working with the markets and really seeing themselves working in probabilities, which is what the markets are, not certainties, probabilities. And they're hooked. And that's good because they love what they're doing. So what happens is you were driven for one reason and you evolved to another. But then you discovered something. What do you find? You find it's not working, It's not working at all. And then you go, well, what do I do now? Now, that's the point at which you really have to begin to say, am I going to take responsibility for myself as a trader? And what I want you to do is to take that word responsibility and break it in half. Okay. And as I said, it becomes response-ability. So the word responsibility in its original form was literally about having the ability, the capacity to manage the responses that go on to different things out in your environment, right? And, boy, that really nails it in trading, right? Because in trading, what you have to do is that being responsible is not enough. You have to develop your response-ability. You have to develop that responsibility so that you move from the kind of brain and mind that you came to trading with. And, is it going to work? It's not going to work, my friends. That brain is built to control outcome. As you know, this is a very consistent theme in every episode, every presentation, every post that I make. The brain that you brought to trading is not the brain you need. The brain that you brought to trading is built to control outcome, and it's built to be right, not wrong, and it wants to predict outcomes. And that's just what it does over and over and over again. So you get into trading and you realize you have no control. Control's an illusion which freaks the brain out, that's been built for, countless millennia to be in control of environment, to be right, to survive, okay? And then to be able to see causal relationships that allow predictions to be made where, back in those caveman's days, where is that woolly mammoth going to be at this particular moment in time? And that's when you go, wow, actually it locks in. That's how the brain works, So your job becomes to literally build your responsibility to a very different world that it was originally built for. The world that you were built for through psychological evolution, what we call evolutionary psychology, is the way a lot of people call it, your personal psychology. Truly, that has built a person that was successful. It worked, adapted to a particular environment where it had to survive. Now, the problem is you're going into a very different environment with a very different set of rules. It's like asking a top flight golfer, right? At the top of his game, let's say it's a PGA golfer, at the top of his game to go and play baseball. Now, you remember the time, probably 15, 20 years ago when Michael Jordan did that. And he, as we know, was the greatest basketballer of all time. But when he went to play baseball, he was not the greatest, right? So there's a need to adapt, and that's where the problem really begins. Your brain is organized around fear, and that leads to a response to fear and aggression. If you can't avoid the threat, you attack the threat or you run away from the threat. If you can, that's what you came to the trading game with. Your brain wants to avoid threat. To your emotional brain, it's very different than what you think of. Oh, well, this is just probability, right? Your brain, as in its current form, doesn't understand probability. It only understands certainty, yes or no, fight, flight, survive or die. So when you're putting cash, when you're betting cash on a risk and getting into that trade and realizing you could lose, your emotional brain is thinking, saber-toothed tiger is going to gobble me up, right? That's what your brain is thinking. And if it stops you there, if your brain stops you right there to get more confirmation, it wins. It gets reward. It gets that dopamine hit, right? It locks that in, and suddenly you have a really hard time pulling the trigger. Do you see how that fear of acting gets locked in as a trait to protect you? It's driven by your brain's desire to stop you and slow you down so that you don't die. That's how it shows up in trading, with the fear of pulling the trigger. Now, the same thing happens when you're losing. Often your caveman brain It's just sitting there going, whoa, I just took a loss. Somebody, some creature just took a chunk out of me. It's taking part of my clan. I have to attack back. I have to render it a non-threat. And to your caveman brain, there's only one way to render a threat as a non-threat, and that is to attack it. All of a sudden, you revenge trade. Who amongst us hasn't been subject to revenge trading, trying to make up for prior losses? And one of the really big ones also is scarcity thinking, where the thing is, you're saying to yourself, oh my God, I've got into profit finally. After all this craziness, I better take the profit now while it's still there before it gets taken off me. Now, this is not a reflection of personal psychology problems. This is evolutionary psychology issues where you're designed for one thing and you're asking that design developed over millions of years to suddenly change for this situation. You realize how impossible that is likely to be. This is the illusion, and this is why you have to grow up and evolve, because it's not going to work. So, hopefully we've got it right there. This is a deadly cocktail. Evolutionary psychology and personal psychology together, it just tears you up, because ultimately, that brain of yours is about control and winning and predicting, and the brain on trading is about probability. All right. Hello, Orville Dave. Good to see you. I'll put your comment up there. Great to see you, and great to see you too, Lygia. Just to jump in and say good day to you guys. Thanks for coming by. So ultimately the big key that has to be gotten is that you're not having thoughts. You don't have thoughts. Thoughts have you. And those thoughts are the caboose. They're not what's driving the train. The train's being driven by the engine called emotion. And those emotions are designed from millions of years ago on the African savannah, and suddenly you're putting them into a probability-based world of trading. It's not going to work. So what I want you to do here is grasp is that there's actually nothing wrong with you. This is one of the things with traders. It's very easy to turn on yourself and think there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you, nothing. Evolution simply did its job. It developed you, adapted you into a human being that survived, okay? Everything's fine. It adapted you for a specific set of circumstances though. And then all of a sudden, you change the circumstances and you're not fit to work in that arena. This is where you have to go, well, how do I go about changing, evolving, growing up? And you can. It is learnable. It really starts with the recognition of emotions, literally that you don't have emotions, they have you, and that they're biological, not psychological. That is a key thing to take away. Emotions are not psychological. They are biological. They give rise to psychology, but they are biological at their source. They overwhelm psychology. And that's where you're going to have a different emotional response ability if you're going to grow yourself as a trader. If you're going to grow up and you're going to do what's necessary to be able to become a consistently profitable trader that can generate a reliable source of income from the markets. Now, once you grasp that whole notion of emotion, the very next thing is, well, how do I start managing that emotion? Now, that starts with breath. Believe it or not, right? Breath, that stuff that's been around, talked about for 4,000 years or more by all the yogis, okay? Because an emotion's biological, it will have a signature that includes the way you breathe and the tension you hold, okay? The very first thing that I teach, in my work is how you can sit there and manage the intensity of an emotion by breath, by the relaxation of tension, and you get it so that it doesn't build, and then wipe you out. We get to interrupt it. Now, that's the very first task of growing up and building the brain that's needed for trading emotional regulation. Is it going to solve the problem? No, it's not. But without solving that first step, without being able to control and manage the intensity of emotion, you're never going to get to the mind. the mind requires you to develop mindfulness practices, what I would call the observer. And suddenly, where you recognize that, you know something, I see a bunch of thoughts floating around in my head. Where did they come from? What are they doing there? How do I deal with them? So what happens is that the observer that I currently am is fused to those thoughts, unexamined. We see thoughts and our current self as being a single phenomena. Unexamined, that's what we think. However, in mindfulness and observer work, you're learning to step back out of thought, recognizing that you are not those thoughts. Okay? Besides that mind of yours, that mind that you call me, it's simply one adaptation amongst a huge potential that got organized into a particular self. Okay? There is no permanent you. You can go and start redesigning the self that trades, this organization of self that trades. Okay? This is when you start going, whoa, right? This is the power of mindfulness. I can't emphasize this enough. This is the power of mindfulness. And then you start going, well, what is this mind business, right? How do I progress from here? Now, I tend to look at the mind as what I would call a governing board that has lots of different personalities in it, some good, some bad, right? They want to take this business, this company, different ways. So they're duking it out, fighting with each other. Now, that company is you. The chairman of the board, that would also be you, has fallen asleep and has been asleep at the wheel for a long time. And as you start to wake up in mindfulness, you realize you've got a meeting going on and you have to start organizing that mind. Not the way it used to be, but into a different way that can do the work of trading. Thanks, Lygia. Yes, I'm glad to get your feedback there. Mindfulness is so powerful. You can be trained, right? You begin to realize, in the same way that fear and aggression are simply parts of your human condition, so are, and I'll go through these 4 key attributes, so are discipline, right? This is the discipline of a ruler. So is courage, the courage of a warrior. So is self-compassion, self-soothing of a caregiver. And also the impartiality of a sage. So discipline, courage, self-compassion, impartiality. You can be trained to pull those emotional programs up to create a completely different committee of your mind that moves into managing the probabilities and uncertainties of trading, right? That's what's needed if the old brain, that caveman brain, with that fear and aggression when it is exposed to uncertainty, is allowed to be there, okay? You're going to continue down that route that most traders do. They blow their accounts up, they blow their cash out in 3 or 4 years and they're gone, right? That's what happens to most traders. Or you can say, you know something, what I really need to do is I need to redevelop my response dash ability so that when I encounter uncertainty, what is summoned up is not the old programming, but the discipline, the courage, the self-soothing, and the impartiality of your new probability mind. Now, fortunately, through techniques known as memory reconstruction and memory consolidation, you can build that access so that literally when you engage in uncertainty, right, instead of the old route, the old programming coming up, you can call forward, and this is where mindset reflexology teaches this, to ultimately auto default and reflex to this new mind that you've built, especially for uncertainty, to manage it. That's what I teach. That's what mindset reflexology ultimately is. It's something that we're all born with. It's always been there. It's a latent talent, and it's, hopefully it's your turn to be able to pull it forward and make it the normal way of engaging uncertainty. It is a big turnaround. It's an unnatural turnaround, but it's a big turnaround that's possible. And compared to the evolutionary person that you are, but this is what gives humans just the ticket to co-create or recreate the world that we're in. Unlike any other creature on the planet, we can step back out of self using mindfulness and breath control to identify the version of self that we are and redesign and recreate ourself so that our reality changes. And friends, this is where it begins. It's recognized that you're going to have to get busy doing some growing up. You're going to have to go, wow, what have I got into trading for? It's not just doing it, right? It's a different game, and I'm going to have to adapt to that game. Not the way I want it to be, but the way you now see it as necessary, right? Then you learn to manage those emotions, which, is obviously emotional regulation, so that you can really begin to separate and become that new version of yourself, right? You can start tinkering with the voices within the self, and you start building a mind out of the discipline, out of the courage, out of the self-compassion, and out of the impartiality that engages the uncertainty. Now, just to jump in there, obviously this is the work that I do with my clients, right? So I'm covering it here at a sort of a summary level. If ever you want to go further with this, you just need to reach out, contact me, and I can talk you through a more detailed explanation. But essentially, this is what I do to teach your brain to no longer freak out under the pressure and stress of that uncertainty of trading. And that opens the door to becoming consistently profitable by being able to execute your system with an edge flawlessly. So that's the game plan, right? It's time to grow up. So thank you for attending this episode. I hope that you've got some gold nuggets out of this and you can take away the essence of what needs to happen to grow up and evolve as a trader and start to look at the work you need to do. Check out the other videos on my YouTube channel, Trading and Mindset, Psychology and Mindset for Traders, or Trading and Psychology and Mindset. I'll get it right in a minute. That's the name of my YouTube channel, where the Mindset Reflexology show episodes sit. I do intend to put some other content on there in due course. And of course, if you're watching this live on LinkedIn, click the follow button so that you can receive updates and invitations to future episodes. Thank you for attending, wherever you may be, whether you're a trader or non-trader or an aspiring trader. I hope you have a successful and profitable day and week ahead, and I will see you soon.